The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
I'm Vinnie Politan, the subject of my investigation, the Au Pair Affair murder trial. It's the story of a man accused of creating a sick, twisted plot to murder his wife so he could be with the much younger au pair. Here's the story. The affluent suburbs of Northern Virginia, the stage for one of the most shocking trials in recent memory. Prosecutors say former IRS agent Brendan Banfield plotted an elaborate murder scheme to kill his wife Christine and a stranger, Joseph Ryan, in their Herndon, Virginia home in February of 2023, so he could be with the family's live-in au pair, Juliana Magalhães. Jurors heard how Banfield posed online under his wife's identity to lure Ryan for a sexual encounter involving a knife, then shot him and stabbed Christine, attempting to stage the scene as an intruder attack. The au pair pleaded guilty to manslaughter in Ryan's death and testified for prosecutors. Meanwhile, Banfield took the stand in his own defense, admitting to the affair, but denying any murder and contradicting the au pair's testimony. Now all the evidence is in, the arguments have been made, and it's time for the jury to speak. And speak they did loudly and clearly in this case. 9 days of evidence, just under 9 hours of deliberation. The jury came back. Let's take a look at that dramatic moment inside the courtroom.
Juror number 9, you were the foreperson in this case, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and are these the verdicts of the jury?
Yes, it is.
And are they unanimous?
Yes, it is.
In criminal case number FE 2024-666, count 1, we, the jury on the issue, join in the case of the Commonwealth of Virginia versus Brendan Robert Banfield, defendant, find the defendant guilty of aggravated murder of Joseph Ryan and Christine Banfield as part of the same act or transaction. Case number FE 2024-666, count 4. We, the jury on the issue, joined in the case of the Commonwealth of Virginia versus Brendan Robert Banfield, defendant, find the defendant guilty of aggravated murder of Joseph Ryan within the same 3-year period during which he did also kill and murder Christine Banfield.
Now you realize the jury just told this man, who professed his innocence and his love for his wife, that he's guilty of murdering her, setting it up so she could be raped, and then murdering her after he pretends to save her. Absolutely torturing the mother of his child while his child's in the house downstairs. And he just took it like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I've seen people wrongfully accused of a crime, and I've seen the way they've reacted. It's not like that. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft, who is live in Fairfax County, Virginia tonight. Kelly, take us to that moment. What was it like inside the courtroom?
Vinnie, we heard there was a verdict, so everyone began lining up to get inside the courtroom. Once the bailiff let us in, everyone grabbed a seat. The courtroom was packed. People started chatting behind me. One gentleman said he believed it was not guilty. So the bailiff said the decision was going to be read, the verdict was going to be read in about 8 minutes. And so we were all waiting, wondering what that verdict was going to be. Brendan Banfield was then brought into the courtroom. Then the judge entered, and then, of course, the jury entered the courtroom as well. And that's when the verdict was read, guilty on all charges. I was taking a look at Christine Banfield's family, who they were seated right behind the attorneys for the Commonwealth. Tears were being wiped away from their faces. On the side of Brendan Banfield, his father was behind him. He has been here throughout the entire trial. No real emotion from his father or his father's wife, who sat right next to him the entire trial. As far as Brendan Banfield, at times he would look down as that verdict was being read. So definitely emotional for many people that were inside the courtroom. Immediately after, the Commonwealth attorney, the Fairfax County Commonwealth attorney, he gave a news conference talking about this situation, saying it was monstrous what this man did, Brendan Banfield. He also talked about the blood evidence as well as the deal given to Juliana Magalhães. She is the au pair who was having the affair with Brendan Banfield. Let's hear what he had to say about that.
We knew two things going into this case. The case was about the blood. This case was always going to be in the blood. You heard it right from Jenna's opening statement. This case was about the blood. We knew that before we even charged this case. The second thing is we want it to be surgical. We want it to be in, we want it to be out. We didn't need to go through every single little thing. We didn't want to confuse the jury. We didn't want to burden them. We didn't want to put them to sleep. What we really wanted is we wanted the high-level stuff, and you saw that. You saw us focus on the blood. You saw us use Juliana or have Juliana come up there to give flavor to what happened in that room. And then we used the blood. We used the digital forensics. We used everything else to support that and give flavor to that.
Without Juliana's proffer, I mean, do you think we could have gone to this result?
I think we can. As a matter of fact, we were planning for it. If you take a look at the timeline of the case, we did not authorize charges against Brendan Banfield until after we got the blood analysis done. That is what we were waiting for. And it wasn't until 2 months after we got the blood and we indicted Brendan for these crimes that Juliana decided to proffer and cooperate with us. So we had planned to go forward with just the blood evidence and everything else, and we felt that we, even with that, we could have put this case on.
I also interviewed a friend of Christine Banfield. They were in a group together, the Husky group. We heard Brendan Banfield talk about the dog Lily when he took the stand in his own defense. The woman we spoke with, Meredith Sanders, had this to say about Brendan Banfield and the situation.
I am so happy that he was found guilty and on every charge. I am so happy. Like, justice was definitely served, 100%. And I'm just beyond excited that he was found guilty. And it's so heartbreaking over Christine. I prayed over it over the weekend, and I'm just so happy that this is over with. I didn't believe a single word that came out of his mouth, not one single word. And he lied about everything, and it just the whole thing. I'm so glad that they were able to bring in that supervisor right at the end to prove that he was lying about his meeting that morning. And that was, I feel like that must have been the closing for the jury. I'm just so happy that she was able to bring that supervisor in right at the last minute.
So overall, Vinnie, the reaction, of course, positive to the verdict because everyone thought him taking the stand, Brendan Banfield being on the stand, no one was really believing a word that was coming out of his mouth. Defense counsel did try to poke as many holes as possible into the prosecutor's theory, attacking that catfishing theory, but in the end, the jurors found Brendan Banfield guilty. That's the latest from here in Fairfax County, Virginia. We'll send it back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Kelly Craft, doing great work throughout the course of this trial. And, you know, any time at the end of a trial and a verdict comes in, I always have one important question that I want to discuss, and it's the first question of our investigation tonight. Was justice served? Means different things to different people. Join me, criminal defense attorney Mario Gallucci and true crime podcaster from Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Tony Bruschi is with us as well. Tony, I'll begin with you. Was justice served here?
In my opinion, yes, they got the right guy. 9 hours of deliberation, guilty in all counts, 2 counts of aggravated murder, firearms charge, child endangerment. The jury saw through him. Do I love that Juliana walks out of jail and probably signs a Netflix deal next month? No, that kind of stings. She helped plan this for months. She watched it happen. She fired a shot, and she's getting time served. But sometimes you make deals with bad people to put away worse ones. That's not a flaw in the system. Love it or hate it, that's how our system works. Banfield bet on his badge, his story, and his ability to outsmart a courtroom, and he lost.
Yeah. Mario, what are your thoughts here? Because I think that's part of the equation, right? The fact that prosecutors at her sentencing will recommend time served for the au pair, but Brendan Banfield, convicted today, was justice served.
So sometimes you have to make a deal with the devil in order to get the real devil, and he's the real devil here. I mean, I've done a lot of murder trials over my career, but this guy certainly takes the cake. I mean, think about what he did with Joseph Ryan. This was a person that he had never met before in his life. He set him up to go to his house to kill him. It's a man that he never met, a man that he literally brought to his home to rape his wife while his child was in a basement. I mean, this guy is just, you heard the prosecutor speak. I believe he called him a monster, and he is. I mean, he is the true definition of monster, without a doubt.
Let me ask you, Tony, because Mario brings up two great points here. The fact that this complete stranger, he sets up to be murdered while at the same time framing him for murder, right? And this plot, to me, it always comes back to the plot. Like Mario said, he is setting up a plot that his wife's final moments will be getting raped. Then she sees her husband miraculously, for some reason, show up at the house and kill her rapist or shoot her rapist. And then at the moment she believes she is saved from the worst day of her life, it turns worse than she could ever imagine as he plunges a knife into her neck. Why would he do it this way?
Too many movies? I don't know. Is he auditioning for a lifetime, role of the worst man of the year award? I don't know. This whole case from the get-go has always read to me, and it still does read to me in some way, shape, or form, that something is off here. I still think we don't have quite the full story. I don't think we have quite the full story from Brendan. I don't think we have quite the whole story from Juliana. And I don't think we have quite the correct story from the state. I still think there's little bits and pieces here that may align themselves slightly different, and maybe that would make more sense. I don't know. But any way you swing it, you have a certain level of depravity and evil here that this man seems to be capable of. And to be able to move on with life through and still keep a very calm demeanor and a straight face.
Let me ask you, Mario, how do you think a guy who could come up with a twisted, depraved plot like this pass the ink blot test to be an armed agent of the IRS?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? I mean, I thought about the same thing. And it was funny because he's always leaning on the fact that he was law enforcement. I mean, he emphasized, I am law enforcement. Look, he's an IRS agent. And look, the IRS agents are law enforcement, but it's not the law enforcement you think of. It's not the FBI. It's not the DEA. It's not your local police. He's an IRS agent, and he made himself out to be, a member of SWAT. So, I mean, that alone is enough to tell you the type of person he is. It's just amazing to me, though, that, I don't know his age. You got to figure he's in his 40s, mid-40s, I guess. But there's never been a sign that this guy had this in him. And to go to the level he went to it's insane.
No, it absolutely is. I've covered, dozens and dozens, it's in the hundreds, I'm sure, of these cases involving spousal or, boyfriend, girlfriend murders. And never have I seen a plot like this one. Okay, Tony, Mario staying with us. Coming up next, how did Brendan Banfield's testimony impact the verdict?
Did you tell her to call 911 at that point?
No.
The Court TV podcast will return.
So it was just before she was arrested that you were fully in love with her?
Well, that's when we had an opportunity to actually have a bit of a relationship. With other points were obviously very separated. I mean, I was still working a lot. Christina was obviously still around, and I was spending a lot of time with her.
He's on the stand telling the jury that, well, I really couldn't fully enjoy my relationship with the au pair because, Christine was still around. As soon as she was gone, then I was able to, enjoy my relationship with the au pair. Like, first of all, listening to him on the witness stand, I mean, how does any woman want to spend time with him? I don't get it. I just don't get it. All right, let's watch some more of this. Really, a lot of people went after the prosecutor for the level of cross-examination, right? It wasn't as extensive as it could have been for a guy like this. Obviously, we now know the results, so it doesn't matter. But as we heard afterwards, it was purposeful. It was surgical. Let's watch.
That is one moment when you see Joe Ryan stab Christine, correct?
Yes, and then downward after she went to the floor. So
okay, so you believe that's another stab?
I'm only positive of the two.
Okay, so you've got two. So there's 5 more. When did he stab her those other 5 times?
The knife is inside of her hair. I can't tell the movement. I can't tell how that is looking at that time. And I don't know exactly what happened before I arrived either.
Okay, well, she had to get 5 more wounds at some point. And you're telling us that when you get into the room, she's capable of speech, correct?
Yes.
Okay, she says a lot of stuff. She says that he's got a knife, right, Brendan? He's got a knife.
Yes.
She says that. And she says at one point that she wants you to put more pressure on her neck, correct?
Yeah, she told me to put my hand there, and then she put more pressure on my hand.
And then at one point, she tells you she can't see, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And all of this talking is happening with what at that point in time has to be all 7 of the wounds in her neck, correct?
Yes.
Great cross-examination, right? They're having like this conversation and she's speaking. 7 wounds in her neck, like fatal wounds in her neck. All right, brings us to the next question in our investigation. It's all about his testimony. How did Brendan Banfield's testimony impact the verdict? Still with me, attorney Mario Gallucci and podcaster Tony Bruschi. What are your thoughts here, Mario? Obviously, it's always controversial when a defendant takes the stand. Here on Court TV, I've seen a lot, and I've seen some successful, some not. But sometimes, people who take the stand are actually guilty. So it does happen from time to time, like with this guy. What are your thoughts about the impact his testimony had on the case?
So look, it's their right to testify, and it's not always what the lawyer wants, but it's their right, and you gotta support it. But I didn't think he was good at all. I thought he was very robotic. He showed no emotion. At one point, he was talking about his dogs, never once mentioned his daughter, never spoke lovingly about his wife, never really, there's no emotion. He was like a robot up there, just regurgitating the facts as he thought they would be and just turning to the jury. Look at his eyes, he keeps shielding his eyes, blinking his eyes. He wasn't a very good witness at all. And it's surprising to me because I thought that his attorney did a really good job with what he had. And, part of, if the defendant's going to testify, it's your job to prepare him not only for the direct examination, but also for the cross. And, there's all those stab wounds. I would have, how did this person get stabbed 7 times? You would tell me how it happened. And he wasn't good. Really wasn't good.
Tony Bruschi, I've got to think, and it happens in these trials, when the defendant testifies, it changes the nature of the case. There's a lot of focus, obviously, on the words and whether or not this person is telling the truth. Jurors will look at other evidence to either corroborate or, call into question what's being said. But the thing about this guy is he's on the stand and he doesn't seem to me to be like human almost, right? There's people talk and it's like, okay, I don't like them, but I get it. Like he didn't seem real.
Mm-hmm. Very devoid of emotion, of empathy, if you will. For me, the testimony, I don't know that it lost him the case, but it sure as hell didn't help him. Here's what got me about him. I mean, he's like a kid, kind of, who gets caught. He tells too many details, too much embellishment without emotion. Like if he just keeps adding layers, the adults will believe him. He had an important meeting that morning, except he didn't. His dying wife, 7 stab wounds to the neck, bleeding out on the floor, stopped to tell him she loved him and she's sorry. She's sorry? Really? That may be what happens here in the Lifetime TV adaptation of the story, but I have a hard time buying that's what happened in this Lifetime itself. The jury needed to see a husband who was devastated by the loss of his wife. What they got was a guy so devoid of emotion, he would have failed the community theater audition for a role about his own life story.
Mario, we analyze testimony and defendants, but I always have to pull back a second and say, okay, wait a minute, there's 2 different ways to look at this, right? One, if this is a man who is being wrongfully prosecuted for something he did not do, and what are the expectations of an innocent person describing the moment that the mother of his child is murdered, versus I don't expect any defendant to be a great actor. Even though he's in the courtroom where Johnny Depp and Amber Heard testified, he's not an actor. So I get that. But the thing with this guy, that it made me believe, yeah, he could have done something like this because of what was coming from that witness stand.
Oh, absolutely. And how does the defense attorney not know that he wasn't at a meeting that morning? I mean, that would have been one of the first things I did was, if you're at a meeting that morning, do I have a witness that'll verify that you were at that meeting that morning? I mean, how do you get a rebuttal from the guy that you're supposed to be meeting with coming into court and saying, we didn't have a meeting, and if we did have a meeting, he wouldn't have been dressed that way. It's unprofessional. I mean, so you have the ability, if he's telling you when you're prepping him that, oh, we had this meeting this morning, I mean, I would have an investigator verify it. I would have a witness ready to verify the fact that he was at that meeting to corroborate his testimony. I've won more trials where the defendant has spoken. I mean, when you face it, jurors, although they're told they can't hold it against you, they all do. They all want to hear what the defendant is going to say and what his story is. But you really need to prepare them for this case. And he wasn't very good.
Yeah. Well, what he was good at, though, was illuminating the truth of what happened. And to me, that's the most important thing at the end of the day for me, because I'm not trying to case on one side or the other. I'm just trying to get to the truth. Big thank you, Mario Gallucci, Tony Bruschi. Always great to have you both on. Still to come, how did the au pair's testimony impact the verdict?
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the au pair affair murder trial. Brendan Banfield set his wife up to be raped before he murdered her while framing an innocent man who was also murdered. He did it all so he could be with the au pair. Here's the story. In a Fairfax County courtroom, the fallout from a brutal double homicide is playing out under the public eye. Brendan Banfield, convicted of murdering his wife Christine and 39-year-old Joseph Ryan inside their family home in February of 2023 in what can only be described as a sick, twisted plot tied to his affair with their au pair, Juliana Magalhães. Banfield and the au pair crafted a false online persona for Christine on a fetish site to lure Joe Ryan for a staged encounter, a rape fantasy with a knife. On the morning of the double murder, Juliana called Brendan, who was waiting at a nearby McDonald's when Joe Ryan showed up at the house. Then they went inside. They left the 4-year-old little girl in the basement while the au pair and Brendan went upstairs, shooting Joe Ryan once each. And then, at the moment she thought she was saved, Brendan stabbed his wife, Christine, in the neck, leaving his daughter without a mom and with a dad in prison. Think about that little girl tonight. Think about that little girl. Mom is gone. Dad, and she's going to read about it. She's going to learn about it. You know, a lot of children don't ever want to believe that their other parent, their surviving parent, is responsible for the murder of their mom or dad. We'll see. You know, that whole au pair thing may play a huge role in the way that little girl eventually looks at what dad did here. But our thoughts are with her tonight, obviously. The au pair. She took a deal, sweetheart deal for involuntary manslaughter, 10-year max, but the prosecutor at her sentencing is going to recommend time served and then just send her off and have her deported back to Brazil. Okay, let's take a look at her testimony, because whether or not prosecutors played it down, it was a huge moment in the trial.
So he didn't want to get divorced. Did he tell you what he wanted to do?
Yes.
What did he say?
He mentioned his plan to get rid of her.
And you said he mentioned his plan to get rid of her.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall what device he used to create the FetLife account?
It was the laptop.
And when you say the laptop, are you talking about Christine's laptop?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall the name of the profile that the defendant created for the FetLife account?
Anastasia Knight.
And was there a photograph added to that profile?
Yes.
Who is the photograph of?
It's Christine's body in a bathing suit. She said we would be able to find somebody that plays like aggressive or that likes playing with blood and that kind of stuff. He was going to stay. He was going to go to the McDonald's, which is say 5-6 minutes away from our house. I was supposed to stay in the car with Valerie to put something on her iPad for her to watch. And as soon as I saw Juliana pulling up the driveway, I was supposed to give Christina a call, but her phone would be off, it would go to voicemail, and I was supposed to call him right away and tell him there was somebody strange coming to the house.
What did you see Brendan do next?
When I was bringing him the towel, he got on top of her, and that's when I first saw him stab her with a knife.
Where on her body was he stabbing her?
Her neck.
And what did you do?
I called 911.
And what happened after you called 911?
At that point, Joe was already shot, so That's the sound in the background. And Brennan looks at me and he just, in a way for me, like to hang up the call.
How did he communicate to you?
A gesture.
And what gesture did he make?
This.
Hang up on 911. I thought that was a powerful moment. But here, what I don't understand about the au pair, by the way, is how does anyone plan a future with a man who is murdering his wife, planning the murder of his wife? That's the guy I want to be with, the hot guy who's murdering his wife to be with me because I'm so special. I'm the special one. He'll never want to murder me. I don't get that. Okay. Next question in our investigation about the au pair. How did the au pair's testimony impact the verdict? Joining me, former state attorney, Palm Beach County, Florida, Dave Arenberg, and private investigator Lauren Vellucci. Thank you both for being here. Dave, I'll begin with you on this. What do you think the impact was? And I'll just, from my perspective, anytime someone cooperates, to me, it gives a juror a level of comfort. Like, okay, someone is admitting that, yeah, this actually happened, right? Someone who might be a little bit, you know, I really think he did it, but, you know, like, where's the real direct evidence? Like, that's direct evidence.
Sure is. She was the narrator of the story. She's the one who provided the inside details. Very helpful for the prosecution. And to me, I thought it was very powerful that she provided the motive, because although motive is not an element of this crime, jurors always want to know the why. Why would you do this to your wife? And she established the emotional stakes here. She testified about their affair, their plans for a future together, even discussing baby names. And in fact, when authorities came to the home, all the pictures of Christine were gone and all the pictures of the au pair were up on the walls. So this was more than a fling. This was something that was going to be permanent for this serial cheater. She gave the jury a reason why this supposedly law-abiding IRS agent who carries a gun will resort to double murder.
You know, Lauren, prosecutors afterwards talked a lot. They said it was the blood evidence. We were waiting for the results of the blood evidence before we arrested Brendan Banfield. The au pair was a nice flavoring. They were downplaying the au pair's testimony. What are your thoughts about the impact?
I think it was vital. I mean, it put a whole picture in front of the jury, and it backed up every single piece of evidence that they displayed for that jury. Her testimony corroborated that. I also think because of her void of emotion, just like Brendan, she didn't show any empathy, any, kindness, any concern for that child, nothing. And as someone who was a nanny for years, this case offends me on so many levels. So I think her just absolute coldness gave the jury a picture of what it was like and someone who was capable of doing this. And then when Brendan got up there and gave the same kind of testimony where he had no feeling and empathy, it gave a picture to that jury about these people were capable of doing this.
Yeah, Dave Arenberg, what a great point from Lauren. I mean, these two, I get it why they were together. Two soulless people.
Yes. So true. Great point, Lauren, because when he took the stand, I thought he bombed. I mean, he was just monotone. He was fumbling when he couldn't remember certain parts of his story. Remember, he made some mistakes about when the plan was hatched. And the prosecution here was smart because they told the jury that they didn't have to believe her blindly. They just said, hey, look at the corroboration. And the key was the blood spatter evidence. That's the key here because they showed that Christine's blood was dripped onto Joseph Ryan's hands from above. And so that totally debunked Brendan's story that Ryan was the aggressor, and that proved once and for all to me that the scene of the crime was clearly staged.
Let's take a listen to a little bit of cross-examination of the au pair.
Well, you're testifying before.
I withheld the truth for a long time just to myself. And it was a lot for me to deal with.
Okay.
And I just couldn't do this anymore. It was too much for me.
Lauren, what about the changing of her story? How much did that bother you, and the timing of it, and whether it was like all of a sudden Brendan's not talking to her, plus, oh, prosecutors will recommend time served?
Yeah, the whole thing bothers me. I hate that she got such a good deal, but I think that they did need her testimony, so I understand it. But, I mean, she had so much to gain, you know, and so it would make sense that her loyalty was first with Brendan, but then as their relationship kind of ended and crumbled off, of course she's going to come out with more because she's looking after her own self. And anyone who's capable of planning something like this, and whether she wants to fully admit it, she did have some culpability in that planning of the murder, is going to be a liar. You can't trust what they say either.
Unreal, these two. What a pair. All right, Dave and Lauren are going to stay with us. Coming up next, what about Joseph Ryan?
Brendan Banfield and Juliana Magalhães colluded to kill Joseph Ryan and Christine Banfield.
This is the Court TV Podcast.
How did you and the defendant communicate with Joe Ryan on Telegram?
By texting.
Did you use any other form of communication on Telegram with him?
Phone call.
Who was it that spoke on the phone with Joe Ryan when you had that phone call?
I spoke to Joe.
Joseph Ryan was catfished and lured to his own death while at the same time being framed for a murder. Now, we haven't seen many pictures of Joseph Ryan in this case, but NBC4 in Washington, D.C. was able to obtain this picture of him. And there we see Joe Ryan. And at the end of the day, like, he is like a double victim of all this, right? Like, they were setting up for his family to believe that he was a murderer who was killed while some heroic IRS agent came in to try to save his wife. But that's not what happened. Now, Joseph Ryan's mother, Deidre Fisher, spoke with NBC4 about the sexual fantasy aspect of the day her son died.
This was kind of out of character, right? Not that he brought a knife, but the idea of actually cutting a woman. Like, he could bring a knife and you just sort of play.
What do you want them to know and think about before they pass judgment?
I want them to look in the mirror. That's what I want. If they have issues, they're their issues. And maybe they're ashamed of their own sexual desires.
You can understand her anger and almost how he's been an afterthought for a lot of people in all of this. Now, obviously, it's been difficult to tell his full story throughout all of this, but his mom doing a good job here. This, again, from NBC4. Take a look at this. She said her son had talked to her about consensual role play, what he was into, and was sometimes consensual BDSM, but it was role play, she said. Joe and I had discussed the idea of cutting and knife play. Joe was not into cutting. He didn't like to create blood. Joe was never violent with women, she said. You don't wake up at 39 and decide, okay, I've never been violent with women my entire life. Now I'm going to stab a woman to death. And that's consistent with all the evidence in this case, even the communications. When they're catfishing him, he is so concerned. He says, if you resist too much, I'm just going to stop. Brings us to the final question in our investigation this hour. What about Joseph Ryan? Still with me, attorney Dave Arenberg, private investigator Lauren Vellucci. Lauren, what are your thoughts about Joe Ryan in all of this?
Unfortunately, we didn't hear a whole lot about him. I feel like I have an idea about Christine and that she was a loving mom and things like that, but I wish that they would have brought out a little more about him because, like you said, he was a double victim. And yeah, I know that trials can only be so long, but I hope that his family feels that he got, somewhat of an accurate portrayal. And like you said, in those text messages, I think you could see the type of person that he was. He clearly wasn't someone violent. He seemed to be more of a gentle person. And his only crime was he was into some kinky sex stuff, you know, like that's not fair. So I wish that they could have brought out maybe a little bit more about the person he was. I feel like I didn't know enough about him.
Yeah. And you know, the kinky sex stuff, like, there's a lot of people into it. This website has a lot of people into it who are communicating with it, and there's a whole subculture involved, and it's probably a lot larger than we think it is. Dave Amberg, what are your thoughts tonight about Joe Ryan through all of this?
You know, it's such a tragedy, and you just see him being made as the villain here, as this weirdo, when the weirdo is the IRS agent who carried the gun, who plotted that not only was he going to destroy 2 lives, he was going to make himself the hero, right? He actually dragged his own wife's name through the mud. It was bad enough that he killed her, but then he tried to make her look like she was the cheater when he was the cheater. Like she said in her final words, "I love you, please forgive me, I'm sorry." Like, that's just horrific. The whole thing is awful. And I'm glad we're talking about Joe Ryan, because it's easy to forget him when we focus rightly on Christine. She is the main victim here, but Joe Ryan was a victim too. And I'm just glad that justice was done, and done fairly quickly, for a lengthy trial where there was a plausible, although hard to believe, explanation here from the defendant.
And Lauren, his mom seems like a very strong advocate, and my guess is she will take advantage of what is afforded to victims and provide a strong victim impact statement to, you know, paint that picture for the world.
Yeah, and good for her. I mean, I felt the courage that she had, and I felt the compassion that she had, and the love for her son. So that, you know, hopefully the judge feels that too, and you know, good for her.
You know, Dave, the selection of Joe Ryan, you know, there was a whole process in this catfishing trying to find their second victim, these two. And they landed on him because he was one who did not require an in-person meeting prior to the encounter. But what we did hear from the au pairs, they had this long 40-minute conversation on the phone. And unfortunately, he was trusting.
Right. You know, his mother described him as someone who loved animals, and that picture of him showed a dog next to him, and he rescued old, quote, ugly rescue dogs. But I think they took advantage of the fact that he was, according to his mom, was somewhat a famous figure in the LARP community, which stands for live action role-playing community. And so he was someone who was not ashamed to be someone who he was, and he made for an easy mark for them. And it's just so tragic. I'm just glad there's a guilty verdict, because it saves his reputation. Had there not been, he would have been murdered, and he'd be the bad guy here. And that's just horrific. So I'm just glad justice was done.
Great point, as always. Dave Arenberg, thank you so much. Lauren Vellucci, appreciate it as well. This case will go down as one of the most twisted spousal murder plots in the history of court TV. It takes a cold soul to think of such a depraved way to make your wife suffer before you murder her. Brendan Banfield's conviction provides some sense of justice, but if the au pair is jetted back to Brazil after her sentencing, a lot of us will be left questioning whether it was the only way to get Brendan. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues. There you have it. If you want to see more in-depth reporting on the latest true crime stories, you can see me every weeknight, 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments. Thank you so much for downloading. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.